So I've gotten a lot of freight packages, but I've never actually had to go pick it up. But evidently the package today, they don't like shipping at FedEx or UPS because they break it a lot. So Southwest Cargo, but unfortunately Southwest doesn't ship to Palm Springs. So I had to drive an hour and a half into Ontario, but it was super easy. I got the package. Let me show you what I got. Okay, here it is. Can you guys see? See if I can zoom in a little. Cornerstone Reef Rock. Tyler over at Coral Vault is sponsoring the new 45-gallon reef tank build. The JBJ, I think, is the RF45, I think it's called. And so he is like the exclusive distributor, I'm sure I'm getting it wrong, but of this new reef rock. It's purple coralline color, looks a lot like the Carib Sea. So I'm gonna try it out. He said he's been selling it at his store and it's been going gangbusters, crazy. So he sent me 2 packages of it, 40 pounds each, so 80 pounds for a 45-gallon tank. I should have a lot of extra to work with. Now, 11:16, I've been here for approximately 10 minutes, and now I gotta turn around and drive another hour and a half home. So today starts the journey. I still have the broken tank right over here, which I'm in conversations to get it replaced. I think I'm gonna replace it. I don't wanna risk the livestock, and I don't wanna risk the floors or the house. So anyway, that's gonna take me a little while to get replaced, but I still don't know anything about macroalgae or seahorse tanks. So we're gonna call up Felicia McCauly. Many of you guys know her. She's been a speaker at MACNA. She's published in all sorts of magazines. She is a seahorse expert. So she was kind enough to say that I could chat with her. So we're gonna give her a call and see if she is available. It's ringing. She also works for Marine Depot, so she's probably working right now. We'll try again later. Good morning. I don't know anything, so I'm hoping today to get... So, okay, you chose this tank for me, and the JBJ... Well, Yes.
What do you got?
I got a JBJ 65-gallon.
Oh, okay.
The goal is do a macroalgae to start with, learn that, get it stable, put in there what I need to, and then when it's ready, add the seahorses. Now, I know, like, I've watched some of your videos, I've read some of your articles, I know there's so many different types, so I'd like to know, like, what do I need to do to get the tank ready? Thinking specifically of, like, Matthew, you should be getting these kind of seahorses because you're gonna have the most success.
Erectus, 100%, there's, like, no question.
Okay, 100% Erectus. Are they big, or are they small?
You start out small, like, thumb size, maybe my thumb size, which is pretty small.
Okay.
But they get hand size.
And are they captive bred? Can you get them captive bred?
You need to get them from Alyssa's Seahorse Savvy.
How many would you put in a tank this size?
2 pairs, maybe 4.
Can you put pipefish with them or no?
That is a very complicated question. It's something we don't usually recommend because when you mix different species, or if you mix, seahorses from one area and then, seahorses from another part of the ocean, they have different strains of bacteria that they carry. And when it's sort of like, I liken it to, Europeans coming to North America and spreading.
What other kinds of fish can I put in there with them?
Yeah, there are a lot of little fish that you can put in with seahorses that people don't realize. Like, when your seahorses are babies, like real little, and they haven't really learned to eat yet, you really shouldn't put anything in with them.
Okay.
But once you are feeling more comfortable, you see your seahorses are growing, they're fat, and they're eating really well several times a day. Because when they're babies, when they're really little, you got to feed them like 3 or 4 times a day, ideally.
Okay.
Gobies, like real small, trimma, eviota, citron, clown gobies, that kind of stuff. Little shrimp gobies, like the amblyeleotris, yasha, stuff like that. Okay. You can even put the little shrimp with them, as long as it's the shrimp that goes with the goby. Don't be getting the great big pistol shrimps that, they're not 100% safe, especially for babies. Pretty much any fish that you want to put with them has to be like completely docile, completely peaceful. Okay. Even algae bloodies are a problem.
Substrate, rock, chiller, UV sterilizer. What sort of gear do I need to get?
Okay, so for substrate, I recommend either bare bottom, which most people don't want to do, or like real fine sand. And the fine sand is better for 2 reasons. If you get really chunky, rocky sand, the seahorse is going to go to the floor and they're going to suck up a piece of mysis, and they might get a big, chunky, sharp rock stuck in their snout.
Okay, yeah, that's not good.
It happens all the time. They get cut inside and then they get an infection. So really fine.
So sugar fine, right? Sugar fine.
Fine sand.
Okay.
So it doesn't cut up their snout. And also, because you're going to want to be siphoning the poop out. Like every time you feed, pretty much, you got to siphon the poop out first. And it only takes a minute. Just have a bucket and a siphon nearby, and you'll be able to see the poop on the sand better because it'll float to the top of the sugar sand. Chunkier, but I just don't like to.
Oh, shoot. Sorry about that.
I lost you.
No, my alarm went off on my phone, and so I clicked the stop button, but I actually clicked the disconnect button instead. So sorry. Sorry about that. Okay. For like live rock, can I just go with any sort of like regular Carib Sea, like anything like that? Any special scaping techniques I need to do for them, or?
They like anything they can hold their tail onto is best. They love branchy stuff, quote, like dry or fake rock. Bristleworms can be a problem with seahorses, so we try to limit them.
Do I need to give them swimming areas? So should I scape it kind of minimally? I mean,
so they don't swim a whole lot.
Okay.
But when they're doing the whole courtship thing, you want to have a space in the tank where it's kind of like a column. Have a column of water in the tank where there's, gentle flow, not like in your face flow. Okay. And where they can rise from the bottom to the very top. Because when they do their courtship, they do need a little bit of space for that.
Temperatures, what do I need to keep it at?
No higher than 74. 74 is the max.
Okay, and what's an ideal temperature?
Between 72 and 74 for the species. Anything between 68 and 74 is ideal for the species. But if you pick one temperature, I'd say 72.
Are there any? I've never done a chiller, so I need to get one. Any brands you recommend?
I like JBJ. I mean, for what we're doing, just a hobby grade thing, and we're only chilling at a few degrees. JBJ is more than acceptable.
What other special gear? You said UV sterilizer I should pick up?
Yes.
I currently run one on my quarantine tank, but I know I have it set for like ick and stuff, so I don't know flow-wise for seahorses.
Yeah, you'd want to do pretty much the same thing for them because, frankly, we're not going to care about plankton in the seahorse tank because they're eating frozen mysis.
Okay.
And your macroalgae doesn't care about plankton, so whatever. What we care about is controlling the bacteria. That's the most important thing because your seahorses, unlike other fish, don't have the gut-associated lymphoid tissue, the immunity that they need to fight the bacteria that's going to be a constant battle for them.
So you said frozen mysis. When they're really small, do they need smaller food?
Frozen mysis is fine.
Okay, frozen mysis works fine. Just any sort of I use Fritz Blue Box. That's fine for salt, I'm guessing.
Oh, yeah, they don't care.
Yeah, okay.
I use tap water and instant ocean.
Do you really? That's hilarious. Filtration. A couple filter socks. Anything else other than the UV sterilizer and the filter socks? Add some ceramic media or no? Or
you don't need ceramic media.
Okay.
Nah. Especially if you've got all that macro.
Yeah.
The mechanical is important for the seahorses because, oh my God, they poop. The poop and the food, it just gets to be so much. And since you're feeding mysis, which is super oily, super full of protein, you're going to want a good protein skimmer.
Oh, okay. Pumps, I was just going to stick with the 2 return pumps that came with the system and then not add a wave maker. Is that correct? Or should I add a wave maker?
That's a tough thing because you don't want something in there that's going to get their tails caught, but they do need flow in their tank because you don't want detritus to settle.
Like a gyre, like an undersized gyre or something, or no?
Do they have a thingy that goes over them to protect fish from getting inside of them? I feel like
they have this Nem Protect thing that I could put on them.
Like a net that goes around it. Yeah. I thought I'd seen that. Max Spec has them.
I just bought it actually. I actually just bought a second gyre, and I bought this thing called, I think it's literally the brand is called Nem Protect. MD sells it now. It's just something on one of those 3D printers. Okay,
well that would actually be perfect. A gyre would be perfect because seahorses actually, people are oh, they need total stagnant water. That is such crap. I have more flow in my seahorse tank than people have in their acro tanks.
Okay.
You just have to spread it around,
Okay. Is there anything I'm forgetting starting out? Because I'm going to obviously have to pick your brain when we get closer. I feel right now I'm probably 6 months away from adding seahorses just because it'll take me a long time to get the macroalgae and stuff like that. So I don't need to go too much into detail about that. But is there anything else I'm forgetting? Because I just want to buy my gear now, get it up and running, and then start with the macros.
Yeah, I think we're on the right track. The chiller, UV, the protein skimmer, those are going to be the important things.
Okay.
You've got the gyre for the flow.
Those pieces of gear will cost me enough anyways. So.
Yeah, true.
Okay, perfect. Well, this is great. I got plenty of work to do, so I will be in touch as I have questions, and hopefully shorter questions. And then when we get closer to the Seahorse, I will pick your brain about Seahorse care specifically, so that I make sure I do it right. Get the medications I need on hand. I've already bought the books you've recommended, so I've got a lot of the stuff.
Wow, this is awesome. No one has ever listened to me before.
Oh, I'm just gonna do what you tell me to do. I'm just gonna do what you tell me to do. So. You tell me to buy it, I buy it. All right, well, I appreciate it, and I know you're busy working, but I will be in touch for sure.
Okay.
Thanks, Felicia.
Thanks.
All right, bye.
Bye.
She's great. That was perfect, right? So much knowledge. This could be the dumbest thing I've ever done in my life. It's the JBJ RB65. Remember the one that I chipped right down here? I have this little tiny bit of water in it, but I have to know. I have to know whether or not it's going to hold water. So I'm going to fill it up with tap water. I'm going to put a video on it while I do it, just in case the tank explodes. Cross my finger it doesn't, and we'll see. Okay, you ready? Here we go. Here it is. I'm going to test it. I'm going to fill it up halfway, tap water, leave it for a few days. I don't know. What do you guys think? Think it's going to crack? I don't know. I really don't know. I should be doing this outside. I'm not. I leveled it, and this could be one of the dumbest things I've ever done. And I might not even post this if it breaks, because, yeah. People in my last video thought I'm just an anemone killer, which doesn't feel good, so I got to work on that. Hello, I'm calling Tyler from Inland Reef. Has this amazing apartment with this gorgeous macroalgae tank. No, he has a reef tank as well, but his macroalgae tank is gorgeous. So since we talked with Felicia yesterday and got the skinny about what we need to buy and what we need to do for seahorses, we're gonna talk to Tyler today because we want to get a macroalgae tank set up and going first and let that stabilize before we add the seahorse, because the seahorses will really like to wrap their tails around some of the macroalgae. So let's give him a call. He said he's free.
Hello?
Hey Tyler, it's Matthew. How are you?
Good, how are you?
You know, my blogger Max, I don't know if you guys know each other, but I think you do.
Yes, we do. We're good friends, yep.
Yeah, well, Max tells me that you might actually start selling some of it because you have to cut yours all the time. And so is that true? Are you going to start selling that just to friends, or like how's that going to work?
Yeah, I guess a shameless plug here. So I'm part owner in Ben's Nems.
Oh, you are? Oh.
Yeah. I am taking over all of the macroalgae. So I'm actually currently throwing up on our website for the drop this week a bunch of macros that have come from my tank.
Oh, interesting.
That we're growing out to essentially create a grow out facility specifically for macroalgae to try and help, I guess, bridge the gap between, you know, the amount available and also the information. So I'm currently trying to essentially create the guide to how to keep
That's awesome.
specific types of macros in home aquariums. And so that's kind of my next step is doing that, and of course, you know, sell it as well. But
here's what I like to get your help with today. So JBJ was kind enough to donate a tank to me, and it's a 65 gallon RF65. It's an all-in-one setup. It's basically like a very tall 40 gallon breeder is the size, and it has a nice big rear filtration chamber. We're building it as a seahorse tank. So I talked to Felicia a couple days ago, and I got the skinny from her. But what I want to do is I want to make the tank a beautiful macroalgae tank first, learn the basics about that, get stuff growing, get it stable before I then add in the seahorses. Do I need to have a substrate? What sort of limitations will I have if I do or if I don't? That kind of stuff.
Okay, so I guess let's start with filtration. We'll go from there. So you said you're gonna have a skimmer. So
yes.
What I'll tell to you is that I know that seahorses tend to poop a lot.
Yeah.
You may be using the skimmer for a little bit, but I think that as your macroalgae does grow in, you most likely will not need it if you're going to be siphoning out the waste, you know, constantly or doing your weekly water changes. Because what's going to happen is that waste is going to break down and create, of course, at the start is ammonia and then nitrate,
Right.
or nitrates, which are then actually taken up by the macros. The red macros actually do really well with ammonia. They break down ammonia first, and then they uptake nitrates. Whereas green macros actually take in nitrates first, and then ammonia second. So it's something where you may use a skimmer. By all means, I would say to start if you'd like to, but if you're going to start with the macroalgae first,
definitely.
I would definitely not run the skimmer, because you're going to make your water so clean that the macro is not going to have the nitrates, the phosphates, the nutrient in the water column to actually survive.
What sort of nutrients are really important, and anything I should be shooting for, any sort of additives I need to be adding, NO3, NO4, PO3, all that kind of stuff?
So both of those, actually. So what I do on my tanks is that I'm dosing Brightwell's nitrate and phosphate. It's their high concentration, so that way I don't have to dose a ton. And then I'm also dosing their Chaeto Grow, which is a fertilizer that contains certain elements like potassium and iron and copper in low amounts. I think that they even have like small traces of magnesium in there, or manganese maybe. I'd have to look at the container again. But what that does is that helps with coloration. Your Chaeto Grow is more of your coloration. Your nitrates and phosphates are more for growing and the health of the macros themselves.
Do you dose those every day, or?
Yeah, I mean, because my tank is full of macros, so I'm having to, just like you would dose, a tank with, your bicarbonate, it's the same way you're doing with macros. And as well, you may notice that your alkalinity and calcium will drop with a macroalgae tank. So when you think of a macro tank, some people think that it's relatively easy, but you're actually adding in more elements than you normally would with just a normal mixed reef or like a softy tank or something like that. I look at it and I kind of treat them very much like an SBS tank. You're doing your dosing for your alkalinity, calcium, and magnesium. Most of the time, if you don't have very calcium hungry macroalgae, your water changes will usually suffice that. And then on top of that, for maintaining growth in between those water changes, dosing your nitrates and phosphates, and then also Chaeto Grow for the extra trace elements, I guess if you would call them, trace elements within the water column that, of course, will be depleted throughout the time in between your water change.
How important is testing? Because I don't want to do an over-reliance on testing here, just in case it's being uptaken and there's no nitrates, no phosphates. Should I be getting a reading? Should I be looking for the coloration, for growth? Like how do I know when I'm dialed in?
So this is where the macro part it takes some eye. So when your macros are growing, they're going to uptake a lot of your nutrients. You're gonna have, most of my tanks sit fairly close to zero, and that is why I'm dosing to try and continue and maintain. For me, I look at growth as it's growing, is it getting larger? Do I see it kind of when a macro is dying or not looking good, you'll see it starts to kind of fade or get whitish, kind of like when you see like an STN and a SBS coral. You start to see the skeleton. It's the same thing with macros. You'll start to see a recession of the color from the tips, and it'll usually start to become white. So now what I recommend to people, because most people like to have a number in which they can shoot for, I would say keep it very consistent with what normal reef tank parameters are. 5 to 10 ppm nitrates, 0.03 to 0.06 phosphates. That's a range. And I would say shoot for that, but don't be surprised if it's less.
Do you think 72 degrees will be good for a lot of different macros?
Yeah, actually, I'd have to look and check with some of them, but a majority of macros that I know of tend to do better in cooler temperatures.
That's good to know.
It seems that most issues come with macros with too much heat, or getting too hot. Just like a normal house plant will start to shrivel if it's under too much sunlight. 72, I guess it's one of those things where it's, once again, trial and error. Some species tend to transition to that better. some do not.
Okay.
So it's a matter of...
Now, what about substrate? What are your thoughts about that, knowing what you know about the Seahorse tank?
Yeah, so like for me, when I think of a Seahorse tank, and I think, you may be kind of going down this line, I love sand. I think having sand in a tank makes a tank look better, especially with Seahorses where they're trying to grab a hold of stuff.
Yeah.
I am all for a sandy substrate because I'm a really big proponent of Caulerpa. I know that people freak out about Caulerpa, and it's usually mostly due to the fact that they think it can go sexual.
Right.
I have had Caulerpas go sexual in my tank. Usually it means that it's melting or it actually exports all the spores and you get this milky color. But really, to be honest, with you doing a very specific macroalgae tank, I would not be scared or shy away from Caulerpa species. It's great for seahorses because they can hold on to it. The Mexican fern Caulerpa, prolifera, which is what you kind of commonly see that looks kind of like seaweed. There's cerulata, which is like kind of like it kind of looks like a chainsaw, so it's a little bit, has some points to it. That one's a really cool one. Even grape Caulerpa, those are neat. The thing you need to realize with Caulerpa species is that they will uptake nutrients quicker than other macros. They are ones that will continuously suck nutrients out of the water column and continually grow. So it's one of those things where if you monitor your parameters, which you said you're going to do, and you do weekly trimmings and you trim it back so that way it's never let run and kind of get out of control, you shouldn't have issues. Not saying that it won't ever happen, but this is the benefit of you having a macroalgae tank. If it goes sexual in your tank, the only downside that's going to happen to your tank is a bump in nutrients from the actual macroalgae melting, because of course it's taking in nutrients, so it's melting, and now nutrient nitrates and phosphates are being released into your water column. But then also, if it releases a whole bunch of spores, guess what? You're in an enclosed system. You don't have to worry about them going into your main display.
Right.
You are. It is the main display. So you might have stuff pop up later on.
Right.
Really cool to watch the evolution of a cycle.
Right.
And if you do have something go sexual, you have a skimmer. Always turn that on. You can always turn that on and do a water change and throw some carbon in, and you'll be fine.
Okay. So do certain macroalgae need a sand bed?
So yes. Yes and no.
Okay.
So specific species, and we'll take seagrass away because they're not a true macroalgae. They're a seagrass. Now, there are specific species like the mermaid span, shaving brush, the pine cone macroalgae. Those are all calcium-based root-growing macros, meaning that they need sand, they need a substrate to actually grow from. So for a tank like yours, the shaving brush would be kind of cool. It looks kind of like a Christmas tree. Pine cone is kind of harder to find. Every once in a while it comes up, but I don't know if that'd be great for your seahorses. And then also the mermaid span, it creates, a very kind of looks like a fan, but I don't know in the sense of maybe just adding more texture or color to your tank would benefit your seahorses.
Okay. How thick of a sand bed?
Inch.
Okay.
I don't think you're going to need a super deep sand bed. So for my tank, because I have my mangroves in there, I do a deeper sand bed more to create that anoxic zone, which is very common in most mangrove flats.
Okay.
But for macroalgae alone, an inch of sand bed should be fine for those calcium-based species.
So you mentioned mangroves. Are mangroves good in a macroalgae tank or not? Are they too advanced?
Yeah, they're fine.
They are
totally fine. The only thing you have to worry about is that they're going to be sticking out of the water column.
Okay.
I don't see any issue with them being in there. The main thing I always recommend to people who are getting mangrove trees is that you either buy it direct, where you can see if the roots are healthy, or buy the propagules, which are non-leafed, non-rooted mangroves. It's like the earliest stage before they go and actually start growing the roots, and then from there start growing the leaves. The reason I say that is because mangroves, if you break the root system, that's almost an instant death in saltwater. They use pressure to actually expel
Keep the salt.
out of
Oh,
their
yeah.
trunk. Yeah, so
That
really
makes
common
sense.
misconception is that red mangroves need to be sprayed on their leaves. They don't need to be sprayed on their leaves. They actually excrete salt from their trunks.
Oh.
And which is then it lies why you have to be very conscious of the roots.
Okay.
If the roots break, it doesn't. It's kind of like opening a faucet. It just allows everything to come through, and then that's why they get mushy and die from.
How do you go about attaching macroalgae to the sand bed or to the rock? Is it different for each species, or?
Yeah, it just depends. It depends on the species.
Okay.
I highly I would never glue a macroalgae.
Okay.
It's one of those things where it will essentially kill it because you're kind of covering it, and so just like anything else, it's going to just wither away from where you glue it. I like using rubber bands. I pin it in between rock works, push it into crevices, because you're kind of doing a low flow tank. For you, just pushing it into the rock work or even just setting it in your tank is totally fine. I mean, I tumble dragon's breath in my sump. I just have it just tumbling and it grows perfectly fine. So it doesn't have to be attached to the rock work. Certain species do, like blue hypnea does better if it's attached. There's a really cool scrolling macro that Dennis and I, have acquired that looks like Montipora that does well growing off of that. But yeah, I mean, really to be honest, stay away from glue. Use rubber bands. If you need to try and glue it to an area where you don't have a place to kind of wedge it into a rock work, take a rubber band and rubber band it around a piece of just rock rubble, and then glue that rock rubble to your rock work. Yeah, and then from there, the macro will grow in over it.
All right, lights. So here, I'll get any kind of light, but I do want to probably put in a mangrove. So, something higher up, something lower down. What do you recommend?
So I'll tell you what I'm running on my systems, and then you can take that recommendation and see where you want to go with it. My current tanks, my macro tank right now is running the Twin Star 900 SP, which is its pendant light. It is a freshwater planted light, sits at about 6,500 Kelvin. It's a really nice light for growing plants, planted aquariums. It does a great job for growing macros, and it also looks really natural. It's growing corals just fine. I have my toadstool and gorgonians, and even I have acroporum growing underneath it. How long is your tank again?
It's like a 40-gallon breeder size, except it's deeper. So instead of it being like 14 inches deep, it's like 16 inches deep. So it's 36 inches long and 16 inches deep, and then depth from top to bottom is...
My tank is 39 inches long by 16 by 16.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. Oh, how high do you mount that, and how long do you run it?
So I had mine mounted about 9 inches above the water level, and I run it for, let's see, my lights come on at 11:30, and they turn off at 9. Okay. So I'd say about like 10 hours-ish, yeah.
Are they programmable, or are they just on and off?
Mine, I bought an additional adapter to run with the Twin Star, and you can program it to have like a on-off time. What
am I missing here that you would need to tell me to go buy some gear and get started? Yeah, what am I missing?
A nice handy pair of scissors.
Scissors.
Literally. You go find yourself a nice pair of aquascaping scissors, like a nice pair of curved scissors. You will enjoy all of that than just trying to sit there and rip it out with your hands. Being able to go in and trim with a pair of scissors is so much easier than trying to rip stuff, because you're going to
pull it out.
Pull things out of the rock work. It's just, you're going to be frustrated because stuff's going to start flying around.
I really appreciate your help. I mean, I don't know anything, so this is crazy helpful, and I think I have enough to go on for now. But yeah, I'll get back with you probably in like a month or so. And do you mind if I shoot you a text occasionally with a question? Cool. Well, Tyler, thank you so much, and I'll be in contact. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, take care.
All right, see you.
Bye. So, did you hear that? I mean, obviously, we just talked for 50 minutes, and I obviously am not going to play all of that for you, but Tyler just gave me like an hour of his time. So, I mean, my mind exploded. I feel like I have enough now after talking with Felicia about seahorses and talking with Tyler about macroalgae that I know what gear to buy, and so I need to go through a list. I think it's probably going to cost another couple thousand. Not that you have to do all this stuff, But because I'm doing the Seahorse tank and I'm doing it right and I'm doing it the way Felicia recommends, it's a little bit more expensive because I need things like the chiller and I need a UV sterilizer. And the chiller is going to cost me, you know, $500 to $800. UV sterilizers, $300. So those are some expensive items right there, and then to get some decent light. So it's going to be a little bit expensive. Not that it has to be, but since I'm doing this tank here and I want to do it right and I want it to be really, really good, I'm just going to go ahead and go with kind of the best things. So I'm going to tap into the old savings and purchase those. Yeah, so I think the next step is get all the gear, get this tank cycled, as long as it doesn't break. I don't know if you can tell, there's water in it right now because it's shipped. So if this explodes, I'm going to have to wait until I get another tank. But if it doesn't explode, then we're just going to go ahead and do this, get it scaped, get it cycled, and then we're going to start with adding some macroalgae, mastering the macroalgae, and then I'm hoping maybe 3 to 4 months after starting the macroalgae, the tank might be ready for some seahorses. I'm not going to rush the seahorses. I want to really feel like I have a decent grasp of the macroalgae before I jump into the seahorses. All right?